5 items on the agenda today, one of which is a decision and the other 4 come at us as information. Tracy, to start with the Karakia, please, Tracy.
Morena tātou. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, I hi aki ana te atakura, I teo, I hoka, I hauhu, ti hei Māori ora.
Thank you, Tracy. Moving on to apologies, we have one for an early departure from Councillor Dunbar Smith. Are there any other apologies?
I may be an early departure, depending on how long it goes. Mine is about a similar time to Ben, yeah.
Yeah, I don't envisage just running on too long today, so I think lunch is booked in for 12 o'clock. I can't see us not making that at this stage. I'll move they be accepted. Second, thank you, Clyde. All in favour? Opposed? So carried. Stu.
I just wanted, if I could, Mr. Chair, introduce Nuri and Jaslyn, who are students that are just sitting in today to observe how we do our business. I'll be here probably for lunch as well, so say good day and et cetera. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
So you might remember Brent Sinclair emailed around offering whether any of us wanted to mentor them, and Pamela and I have offered, and so they're here on Wednesdays generally, just so.
Thank you and welcome, ladies. Right, we'll move on to confirmation of the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Dunbar Smith. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest other than already noted? Right, we'll move on to the review of the significance and engagement policy.
Mr. Chair, if I can just introduce a couple of these items. So on behalf of Janine, these items, first 2 items are related to the first of a number of matters you'll be tending to over the next few months in regard to the Council's upcoming long-term plan. So as we've mentioned previous, there are a number of policies, a number of steps along the way that need to be endorsed by Council. It's within the terms of reference of this committee for those matters. Whilst they sit within the Finance and Business Services Directorate, it's very much part of this committee. So we have Haven Walsh. I think you've met Haven, who's our Corporate Planning Manager, around January, February, the business we're in workshops. And we also have Jane Appley. I think, Jane, you might have the next item. Jane sitting over there and will come up to the table shortly. So they are in our corporate planning team. Thanks, Haven.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Chair. I think we have a couple of slides. Is that right? It's okay.
Just send the presentation to James now.
Oh, okay, so yeah, the report's there. The purpose of the report is to provide you an overview of the review of our significance and engagement policy and seek this committee's endorsement of those proposed changes and a recommendation that Council approve that updated policy. So those slides up, they're just a high-level overview of what's in the report anyway. But I guess it was just to give an overview of the purpose of the policy and then the key findings and from that. Essentially, a significance and engagement policy is just a document that all councils have to prepare under the Local Government Act, and they provide guidance in when and how we engage with our communities. So we've done a desktop review against other councils and then linked in with the key staff to inform. Yeah, maybe it's coming. So yeah, there's a first bullet point there, essentially just noting that that's our key document. It gives our lets our communities know when and how they can expect to be engaged with. It's generally best practice to review the policy every 3 years, and we have always done that as part of the LTP preparation. So we will use this policy document again as we prepare the long-term plan and those issues and matters. We get the long list of issues and matters. We'll test that against the assessment criteria in the policy and share that with you. And when you decide what we finally consult on, that will be the basis of our consultation document. Just flick over. Okay. One too far, or there's a slide missing, but essentially the key high-level findings of there it is there, sorry. Yeah. So the key findings was that overall the policy remains largely robust and fit for purpose. There is a recommendation in there to define what we mean when we say significant activity, because we've found that some staff have had some confusion dealing with that assessment criteria question. So that's kind of outlined in the report. The other key change is updating the strategic assets list. So in light of some of the recent weather events we've had, particularly at the start of this year, we thought it would be useful to include its track change in the document, that explanation of our communications and flood monitoring and control systems that we use for communication. So that has been track change into the document, and we have found that other councils have used that in their strategic asset lists as well. So those are the two key changes to the policy. Those next two bullet points down are more about how we use the policy internally, and then some of the guidance and templates that staff run through when they make their assessments. And those are attached to the back of the report as well.
If I can stop you there, Hayden, we have a question from Councillor Nicol.
Yep.
I'm happy to wait till after the presentation's done if you think that flows better, but otherwise I can ask it now.
And did you want to ask something once your mic goes, Chris?
I have got a question.
I think that actually takes us through the two slides anyway.
Look, I'm happy to wait till.
Could us go? Yep. We'll move on with the slides.
Thank you. So yeah, I think that's the end of the slides. So I can open up for discussion.
It is question time. So I'll go back to Councillor Nicol.
Hey. Yeah, I like a lot of the changes that have been made. The one part, I believe we talked a lot about future for local government review and the talk of increasing deliberative democracy processes. I was wondering if we might be able to include examples like citizens' assembly or budgeting in that table at the back, which is about empowering and just since that's becoming more of our narrative now. And the other comment was a sentence that gets repeated in there. Wanted to get feedback on whether adding a word would be useful, and that was, in general, the more significant an issue, the greater the need for effective community engagement. But effective adds value there. Process feedback on that just because you use this policy or whether that's not necessary.
Councillors, I've got your speaking order. If I can just get you to drop your mics out so we can let Tracy in. Thank you.
Sorry, Jen, where is this on what specific page?
For example, this one, page 15, it's about halfway down just before the underlines. It says, in general, the more significant an issue, the greater the need for community engagement. I was asking if it makes sense to say for effective community engagement.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Hayden, just a point of clarification. Under clause 27, which is one that you're amending, you're referring to 2% of total value of council's assets in that year. So I've got two questions. Number one, given that the council's planning to take on debt in future, I just question whether that should be net assets rather than total assets. Sorry about that.
For the students here, that's actually a fine.
Yeah, it cost me a beer later on the day. So that was the first point. The second point is how often is that number updated so that the team have got a reference to a figure which they know they're going to be working to rather than coming and annoying you all the time.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hughes. So that amendment was worked on primarily by our finance team, Janine, and also our asset management team, I understand. So I'm happy to test that change with them and bring it back. In terms of how often it's used and the number that we review it every time, and they took a look at what that 2% would equate to. So there is an understanding of what that value would be.
My question is, at what point in time is that number established? Is it the audited financials from the prior year, or is it a moving target during the year?
I think Tracy might have some input.
My understanding is it would be based on what our assets are at that point in time. So those assets are updated each month. So we have monthly accounts, and it would be the currency of those accounts that are actually it would be calculated on.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Looking at page 8, paragraph 16, significant activity. This is somewhat perplexing to me. And it says, given council does not provide any core functions, so if council doesn't provide any core functions, I wonder what we're doing here, including this as a consideration, blah, 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 adds little value. Proposed change that going through second line, significant activity to identify that no WRC activities are considered significant. I think the ratepayers would have a real issue with that. And so I think for the context and to enable me to explain to ratepayers, I'd like to understand this a little bit more, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So that was one that we did have a bit of discussion on. I believe it's a hangover from the legislation when it changed back to have the wellbeings in. Previously, the LGA noted council's core responsibilities, and they were things like water supply, stormwater, wastewater, and transport. And I don't think any of those activities at that stage were applied to regional councils anyway. But because the template was developed by Waikato LAS, or now CoLab, it was a general template that we all adopted. So it was useful for some of those other councils, and ours just reflected that at that time. We've kept it in there and defined it as us having no significant activities. One of the options was to remove reference to it entirely, but we thought there might be a time when it becomes useful if we do want to decide one of our activities is useful, and it might also help readers around the region just have consistency amongst it.
Reality for me, I can't accept this. Council has significant activities, and it's in flood relief in the ICM area. It coordinates the public transport in the region. Those are activities. If council didn't do those, others would pick it up, I suppose, but we're legislated to do that. That's significant for a large part of our community. The landowners that are protected by river assets and dot banks and the likes. So those activities are significant, and they are core to the business of this council. So I just cannot certainly accept this at the moment, and would like some more discussion on it, please.
Perhaps I could just assist, Haven. So those matters that you've identified, so the significant activities had the specific definition in the LGA, of which we didn't operate. We capture all those matters that you talked about, Councillor Smith, as strategic assets, and we've specifically reviewed those matters that are identified as strategic assets, so that should we do something that triggers the need for the significance and engagement policy, we have those matters well captured.
I appreciate the explanation and the fact that it's under assets, but it also comes under activity, in my view. So it may be semantics, I don't know, but to me it is. Yeah, I'd like to hear the others' comments if I can, please.
Councillor Kneebone.
Yeah, look, I get where Noel's coming from, and I agree. However, ultimately, this is just the report. It's actually about what the policy, how the policy itself is worded.
Yeah.
Is probably the thing we need to make sure we get right. And because really the wording should be, doesn't provide any core functions under the definition of da, 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 da.
You're happy with that explanation, Noel? I think it does clear it up. It comes back into what is in policy.
Yeah.
Just, and I understand, I looked at it as a first read too, and went, what do you mean we don't do anything significant? Yeah.
It's a bit like the core functions as well. I mean, definition thing.
Which I think, if we turn to page 12 of the agenda, you will see the definitions there, and there is the definition of significant activity, which specifically relates to that section. It's not to say what we don't do is significant, just the term significant activity has a specific definition in terms of the Local Government Act.
Councillor Nicol?
Yeah, just want to back that previous conversation, and it's important that when members of the public were to look at a policy like this, that it makes sense to them, and that they don't need to know the Local Government Act for that to be the case. And the same as well, I notice in our reports that we get on making various decisions, there is the piece in there about the significance and engagement policy, and often you'll find almost every time it says this is not significant. But when you are a member of the public reading that, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't seem right. So anything we can do to make ourselves very clearly understood will prevent what Noel's talking about there.
Yeah.
Honestly, Mr. Chairman, I'm confused as a councillor, let alone any ratepayer is going to pick this up and read it. So, you know, again, it's information just for us, I think, more so to.
Again, a report on a policy. Yeah.
Yeah, greatest respect, Michael. It's not just for us. The community, when they want to, and there's issues, they will pick up the significance policy and challenge us on it. So it needs to say what we actually want it to say. And Jen's point is, it's for the reader who knows nothing about what we do to understand. Okay, they've got ignorance is no excuse, but the reality is, if these reports and the policies aren't able to be understood clearly by members of the public, then we need to get our language right. That's all.
Yeah, Councillor Smith, what I'm saying is that this report is for us to go into the policy. You know, the ratepayers are going to read the policy.
I'll come back to Tracy for a quick comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, taking on board the conversation, we'll have a conversation with our democracy team and just sharpen up some of that languaging in the report. It's been like that for 6 years, so it's we've identified it now, but I think it's worth following up and just mindful, exactly as Councillor Downard said, mindful of the languaging in the actual report, but as Councillor Kneebone said, it's that policy that you will be using to determine whether you go out and consult on something. So we'll just step that through. But I think the matter that Councillor Nicol and Councillor Smith have raised in terms of saying things aren't significant, what we're saying is they are not a significant activity defined in the LGA, but it is a significant part of our business. Words.
Thank you, Tracy. Do we have any other questions for Haven?
One quick one, and that was when people fill in the policy assessment table, do they have further guidance on what large proportion or level of, you know, these quite subjective still? Do they have further guidance, or is that something that we just handle amongst staff mentoring?
Yeah, well, we've developed up that assessment instructions table on page 18 of the report. That's a new mechanism that we've had to try help people. They pose it as more of a question rather than a blank. It used to just be a blank box, and now they can also use that continuum from low to medium, high. But there's definitely potentially some work to do some internal training so that we can workshop with the key staff so that everyone's on the same page about how to.
As
do this
consistent
assessment.
as possible.
Yeah.
Cool. No, it looks like we're putting improvements in, and I imagine when it comes in back in 3 years, we may put more improvements in. No, we've got to keep getting more consistent over time. But I haven't seen it misused over the past 3 years either that I've noticed. So, it's
Thanks,
progress.
Jen. Right, if there's no other questions, the motion we have in front of us is to receive the significance and engagement policy review report, and that the proposed changes to the significance and engagement policy are endorsed by the committee and recommended to council for adoption. I have a mover. Thank you, councillor Downard. Seconded. Thank you, councillor Kneebone. Those in favour? Opposed? Oh,
Mr. Chair, just for clarity, are we accepting the draft that is in this report, or are there going to be further alterations, and should those be noted in should we say proposed changes and those discussed at this meeting? Just to make sure that there is an opportunity to have that refinement without it having to come back through this committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think there will, if anything, Haven and the team will go away, have a look at what we spoke about. I think the changes to the policy would be minor.
Mm.
What I would say is councillors will get to have another look at this as it comes through the LTP. And we will make sure through Haven and Jane that those matters are specifically identified then.
we had a seconder and councillor Kneebone, yeah. Councillor Downard, I'll
Or
come.
to reflect the discussion had at this meeting?
Yeah, well, the discussion was one word to change the Nichols word. Added, and then I doing the rest that counts on policy seemed to be.
But sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding of Councillor Smith's issues were within the policy, as well as Councillor Nichol, what she raised in terms of ensuring that we add some of that plain English to the policy itself, because taking the point that members of the public don't pick up our reports, they will pick up that policy. So just wanting to make sure that does get recorded. I think it's the appropriate way.
And the examples on the table, yeah.
I just want to clarify that we're around what you're suggesting needs to change within this report, and what wording.
The word changes is probably a bit extreme for what we've talked about. It's more minor amendments to aid and assist with clarification and understanding,
Okay.
which I'm quite comfortable word it that way, given it's coming back to us again, yeah.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, the recommendation could read something like, I'm writing it on the fly, apologies, that, so I would say that the significant engagement policy is endorsed by the committee, subject to any further minor amendments in relation to clarity being highlighted at subsequent LTP discussions, LTP meeting discussion. So what I'm trying to capture there is the policy is endorsed because I'm hearing there's no substantive reaction to it. However, it will be brought back before council so you can see any further minor amendments that are made. So you have the confidence that Haven's listened well to what you've said today and made any, as Councillor Nebo said, minor amendments.
That in the recommendation to council at the next council meeting.
Haven, would you like to do it that way or through the LTP workshops and discussions with councillors?
If we can get it endorsed, then we can use the updated policy.
Yeah.
Once we do the assessment.
So basically, we get it dealt with those amendments brought in and brought to council, and then that's the policy.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're living with the existing one.
So the proposed significance and engagement policy is endorsed by the committee, subject to amendments being brought before the May council meeting. Minor amendments being highlighted at the May council meeting.
So it was any
Which-
minor
which-
amendments?
Just to be clear, council, means we will not be relitigating and discussing the entirety of the policy at the council meeting, just having those minor amendments highlighted.
Hallelujah.
So you wanted to present back?
Subject to minor amendments being highlighted at the May council meeting. So when,
I think we're making this a bit more complicated
think
than it
we are.
needs to be. I think that the mood of the, sorry, through
Yes.
you, Mr. Chair. I think that the mood of the room is that we just wanted some plain English up front to clarify the intent. And I think that I trust that between Haven and yourself, Tracy, that you have captured that intent we are wishing to express. I think that the majority, the content of this policy, everybody is comfortable with. So I would like to see us give staff permission to go in and add that clarification in. So I would like to see this motion be broad enough to allow that to happen. It's just for efficiency. I don't think it needs to come back through a full council meeting.
I'd tend to agree, and I think it came down to the definition around that significant, activities. So it's just a little bit of clarification, if I'm reading the room right, around that description. So, yeah. So we're happy with how it reads now, that
And
the proposed,
I think instead of minor amendments, I think it was just minor clarification. Because amendment sounds
yep,
much more substantive
As
than
if
what
it's a-
I believe we were asking for here, which was just intent. I don't. But I neither moved nor seconded this, so.
That's,
we'll come back to, So as it reads there, that the proposed significance and engagement policy is endorsed by the committee, subject to any minor clarification being highlighted that were discussed at this meeting.
for you, Mr. Chair, I think it should read, and I'm just trying to help out the mover and seconder here, that the proposed significant and engagement policy is endorsed by the committee, noting that minor amendments to clarify significant activity will be made. Because that was the only point. There's not, while we discussed, there was only that one matter.
and I wanted the,
Okay. And that
I think
minor amendments to increase clarity will be undertaken.
that,
They're seeing democracy in
I'm-
action. Thank you, councillor Downer.
I'm mindful that
Get all that.
our staff want to get on with employing the new significance.
Councillors, please.
I'm mindful our staff want to get on with implementing this policy pretty much now, so it's important we endorse it now. And going back to what Tracy said at the beginning, it will come back to us in the very near future to essentially look at again as part of the long-term plan. And so the parts that I wanted in there was giving the examples on the table for citizens assembly and participatory budgeting. As long as those make it in there at some point in the next year, I'm comfortable.
Do we have obligation to endorse it, change it, whatever, or does it have to go back to council to have the change?
It comes through this committee and then it will be reported through council by, by
Reported or approved.
Sorry, it comes through this committee. It will be a recommendation to council, which essentially will be an approval by council.
Thank you.
So going back to councillor Downard, with his,
Over there.
he's moved over there. Happy. Well, we're clarifying it for your understanding. And coming back to councillor Nebo, and you're happy to second as it stands. Those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving up to the next item, which is page 20 in your notes there. It's the long-term plan project update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So
Sorry, Haven. Sorry.
this is me again. You've got the report there. It's been well drafted by Jane Appley over here, who's the LTP project manager. I'll just give you a quick update. I won't speak to it in too much detail, but we had a project overview brought to council recently, and it was agreed then that the Strategy and Policy Committee would receive ongoing monitoring. So this is the first monitoring report of how the long-term plan is progressing. So as it notes there, it's an 18-month program of work delivered through 7 work streams. We're about 5 months into that work program, and at the moment, everything is currently on track. And that activity work stream, which is the business we're in, workshops and the group of activities that were approved by council, has been completed. The current focus for the organisation is the levels of service review, which is the review to make sure that they're giving effect to the strategic direction that was recently approved by council, as well as our Te Ara Tupu internal corporate plan. So the teams are out there reviewing all the functions and services they do and coming up with proposals for any changes to help give effect to that new strategic direction. And you'll see those come through the levels of service workshops in June. That's essentially covering off that first slide there. The next one just gives a little update and an overview of the constructive conversations model, which some of you may be familiar with from the last LTP. Essentially, what's it saying there, step 1 was when council developed its strategic direction, and now step 2 is where we're at the moment, reviewing our levels of service to give effect to that, and primarily through those strategic ideas to change the levels of service. So when those come to council, that's that go, the levels of service workshops come to council, that's that go/no-go gate there. Some of those changes that you endorse council or staff to work on will then go into business cases, and then they'll come back to you later in the year for that second go/no-go gate. Then they get incorporated into the draft long-term plan. And then after that's all approved, they get implemented in the actual long-term plan through the projects and business that we do. So if we just click over to the next slide, this is our curly whirly snake that you may also be familiar with. We're still towards the front end of that pink red icon there notes where we are at the moment. The key main discussions coming up are a workshop at the end of this month on the non-financial forecasting assumptions, and maybe an early discussion on the infrastructure strategy. And then the next key piece of work is those levels of service workshops. So we'll keep this updated each time we come to the committee. So hopefully that gives you a rundown or an overview of the report. But again, happy to open up for any question discussion.
Did we have, councillors, any questions for Haven on this report?
I'm happy to receive the report.
Thank you, councillor Story. Seconded. Thank you, councillor Nicol. Sorry. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Clean Whole Plan Progress Update. And that's page 26 of your program. You want to introduce?
Councillors, this paper, so we have Patrick Whaley, who's our Biosecurity and Biodiversity Manager at Integrated Catchment, who you've had the pleasure of meeting before. This paper is really best termed as a heads up paper for yourself. Now, it is a paper that addresses a topic that's moving with some haste some weeks and not other weeks. So Patrick and I thought it would be a good idea to give you this paper, but of course some things may have happened between the writing of the paper and today, so Patrick will update you on those if anything's happened. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, and good morning, councillors. The long and the short of it, it's in one of those not moving fast phases. So we've been working for a long time with MPI DOC in the 4 top regions, mainly through advocacy and educating, trying to manage marine pests. We're moving into having some legislative framework to work within. MPI is leading it, and it's currently sitting in cabinet and hasn't moved. So I was hoping to come here and say, here's the timeline, and give you some confidence on what the timeline would be for, say, consultation. But unfortunately, I can say with confidence that we have no idea when that's going to happen. I'll have Danielle Kruger here if there's any questions around the end of the program or any detail around that.
I'll come to Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Last week we heard a presentation in BC councillor in relation to a development at Thames. So bullet point 16 or paragraph 16 states the Waikato has been assessed as currently having adequate facilities available to support the implementation of CHP. Does that include the proposed or the development that's happening now at Thames, or is that will be in addition to the current activity?
So Patrick, for your information, councillors at council discussed the Kupu Marine Precinct and that development.
Thank you. So the assessment was undertaken for with the current status quo. A look at the haul out facilities that are available across the region for our.
Thank you.
So where my comments, Noel, came through in that process is basically what's happening up around the Auckland region is they're losing a lot of haul out facilities, and Kupu with the development has been identified as an area that will probably pick up a lot of those Auckland vessels for a facility able to be within close proximity and have that haul out facility.
Essentially, we have sufficient to cater for our own needs in the region, but the Kupu one would be able to support out of Auckland and therefore economic development, etc., and growth in Thames supplements.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Thank you. Councillor Nebo.
Just so where we have no idea when the proposed regulatory framework is going to be available for us.
So I guess we were hoping that it would be consulted on prior to the election, like with the slippage in the timelines, that will be voluntarily after the election. So, sorry, who knows?
Fair enough.
Councillor Hodge.
Kia ora, Patrick. Long time no see. Hey, I think it's a great paper, but how do you plan to police this?
So the proposed. Oh, sorry. So the proposal as it stands, which obviously is subject to the consultation process, is to implement a 2 to 3 year period of education and advocacy, and then bring in a number of rules that apply to the cleanliness of the vessels. The vessels are currently inspected every year. We do about 90% of our fleet, and that will then follow where the vessels are beyond the level of foul that is tolerated under the plan. There will then be a process for noting which vessels they are, sharing that information with our regional partners, and then watching to see how the vessels, whether the vessels move or not, obviously working with the vessel owner in the meantime to help them understand their obligations.
So I guess the other thing would be is up to date before this paper was done. I'm presuming that the clean hull wasn't a priority. And because of that, you're now going to implement something totally new. So how have we been dealing prior to this paper around clean hull? And is this paper going to lift that up to a percentage of a better way of going? Hence why I say how can police it? Sounding like, listening to what you said is all well and good, but that doesn't police all the different boats that are coming in and out. And I can't presume that we can afford to have someone out there checking every boat. So I guess that's the whole idea. A piece of paper is fine. It's only as good as what's written on it. But somewhere along the line, if we're not going to be policing these damn things, they're just a waste of paper. So, you know, I like to understand the difference between what's happened up to today and what this paper is planning to do into the future. Not today, but I really would like to know how that works.
Well, I mean, the whole idea is that we will be checking all the vessels, and with our regional neighbours, they'll be checking any that cross boundaries. So, and this gives us the ability to ensure that it happens rather than just asking people nicely, which is what happens now.
I think also, Katarina, what you're going to get, I can see in the future out of this will become basically like a boat warrant of fitness for those larger vessels that are travelling coastally up and down. Marinas have it now. You have to produce evidence that you've had your hull cleaned in the last year prior to coming into someone's marina, et cetera, et cetera. So, and as Patrick indicated, this is with our regional partners, Auckland, Northland, et cetera, where we've got a lot of that transfer of vessels up and down the coast. So that will build on that process. Regionally, it's being done in-house now in our own areas, but this will just expand a solution that is current for everybody and the same. So everybody's coming up to the same sort of standards in that right across that area to try and work against this biosecurity or with biosecurity in the future. Sorry, Claude.
Thanks. Hi, Patrick. Look, some years back when I was in council, there was an issue identified with fanworm, was it? It was a pending problem growing. How did the mitigation process put in place? Has that been effective?
So the Mediterranean fanworm continues to be an issue. There was an initial incursion response plan that was enacted with the Ministry for Primary Industries, and there was diver delimiting undertaken at great expense. That unfortunately was not successful, so they were unable to eradicate it. It has continued to slowly spread naturally from the original incursion point, and much of the effort now has been focused around making sure that it doesn't travel on vessels, so the man-mediated spread. That has been, to date, that has been the surveillance program. So the dive surveillance program, we have identified a number of, it's under 10 vessels that have travelled to other locations over the last few years with fanworm on them. And our divers have been able to pick them up. In some instances, they've actually been reported by marina owners. So that shows that that the industry partners coming alongside in stopping the spread. But we've managed to catch them, to catch where a vessel has been moved to that point, and then work with the vessel owner to have the vessel hauled out, or else have it removed, the fanworm removed by hand by divers. And then we have a follow-up program to make sure that there has been no new population established. So to date, we've got some, in summary, I guess there's some natural spread, which we expected and will continue to occur, but we have not had any additional sites from that initial one through vessel mediated spread.
Is eradication the plan, or learning to live with it?
There's no tools available at present for eradication. So it's something we'll have to learn to live with.
It has become a pest for the aquaculture farmers too, Clyde. They're getting it on their spat lines. Any other questions for Patrick and his team? So we have before us a motion that the report to the Clean Hull Plan and Progress Update be received. So moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Hughes. Those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yep, sure. Next up, we have the dangerous dams, and Tracy will give us a little bit of an intro on that.
So councillors, this is a report. It is an information report, but we wanted to Again, a heads up, a limber up that we are required to go through a statutory process to update our dangerous dams policy. We will have to proceed through that. For our new councillors, there is a very formal process when we are changing some policies like this that have their provenance in the Building Act or the Local Government Act, called a special consultative procedure special consultative process under the Local Government Act, which has specific steps that we must follow. What we wanted to do is, instead of bringing that to you straight away and saying, now this needs to go through a special consultative process, to give you a bit of background so you're tuned into it, we have Annika from Lizette's team who is leading this, and our client is Owen Smith, our project manager for dams under the Building Act, who sits in our RUD department. So Owen has been the person who has managed and been at the coalface, or the dam face, we should say, for these projects for many years, and Annika will be taking this policy through the process. It's one that will have quite a degree of interest out there in the community. So we just wanted to make you aware of some of the issues and the process we'll be going through. Over to you, Annika and Owen.
Thank you, Tracy. So as Tracy's already informed you, it's an opportunity today to let you know about the work we are doing to review this policy. So the Waikato Regional Council already has a dangerous dams policy. This was approved back in 2006. This policy was, however, contingent on the release of the dam safety regulations, and these were repeatedly deferred, but they will now come into effect in 2024, in May, sorry. So we are now working to update our policy to align with these new regulations. The regulations themselves primarily place requirements on dam owners to ensure that their classifiable dams are being managed appropriately, proportionate to the risks they pose. So the regulations require dam owners to immediately notify Regional Council if they have reasonable grounds for believing that their dam is dangerous. And to just give you some context here, and it's in the report as well, I thought I would define a dangerous dam for you. So that is a high potential impact or medium potential impact dam that is likely to fail in the ordinary course of events, or in a moderate earthquake or a moderate flood. And that potential impact that I refer to there as being medium or high, this is assessed by the dam owner and must be certified by an engineer. So regional councils are required to have a dangerous dams policy, and this is a requirement, as Tracy mentioned, under the Building Act. It is a short and discreet policy to reflect the Regional Council's legislative requirements. It must cover how the Regional Council will undertake its functions in relation to these dangerous dams. And this may, for example, involve seeking to agree actions with a dam owner to increase surveillance or monitoring, operational changes to the dam, or physical works to the dam. And if the dam is dangerous, the council may also erect hoarding or a fence to give written notice to remove or reduce the danger. So those are the types of things you'll see in the policy. We are collaborating with regional councils to develop a consistent policy template, hopefully across the regions, but obviously there will be some elements that are kept as region specific. As Tracy's already alluded to, we will be taking this through a special consultative procedure, which involves public consultation and written and oral submissions. And we will come back before the committee or council for endorsement prior to progressing through to that stage. So we're happy now to take any questions you might have.
Councillor Kneebone.
Yeah, thanks. My recollection is that this council provides this monitoring regulation service for other regional councils around the country.
Correct.
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
and sorry.
Yeah. I can't remember what scale of that is, but I guess my question was: will those other councils that we provide this service for simply just adopt our policy, or are they going to want to put a process into their own unique policy?
So we're working together and collaborating with a lot of those councils to produce a policy that is relatively consistent across the regions. However, there might be minor elements that do get changed so that they're regional specific, but I'll let Owen.
I'd clarify in terms of our engagement with other regions. We do accept a building consent process for other councils throughout New Zealand. That is the only collaborative role we have with other councils. Dangerous dam policy is not part of the building consent process. It's part of the Building Act process, distinctly separate, and each council have their own responsibility for dangerous dams, policy, and follow up in their own regions.
Councillor Story.
Just interested in I see the paragraph 7 where it's talking about the dam owners uh, requirement to have the dangerous nature or otherwise assessed by an engineer. How often is that required? What's the frequency or what triggers the?
There's different types of dams, and we refer to high PLC dams, potential impact dams, like the Karakias and the large at-risk population, people, infrastructure, environment. You have medium ones, and then your low-risk ones like farm dams and things like that there. There's different criteria for the different categories. So a high-risk dam is assessed annually, I believe, and a 5-year one, so the low PLCs only have to have their PIC assessment done every year. But the dangerous dam part only applies to high impact dams and medium impact dams. So there's a lot of other large dams out there that this policy, apart from getting their PIC assessment, potential impact classification assessed for low dams every 5 years, there's no other responsibility they have to do. And
So,
I'll just clarify one other thing from Nika said before. She said about engineers have to sign off on this. There's actual categories, they call them recognised engineers, who have to go through a special qualification through Engineering New Zealand to become accredited as a recognised dam engineer.
okay, so just I'm thinking mainly to I assume Mercury is all across what their requirements are. I'm thinking more in terms of the low level on farm dams. So help me again. So are you saying every 5 years those low level ones have to be assessed?
Or a potential impact classification, that is purely to pick up that if you've got a dam there that's low risk right now, but for some reason there's a new anyway sleepyhead development downstream,
Right.
to pick up any risks that have developed over the years.
Okay, so every 5 years, a landowner in a rural area that has to have this PIC classification undertaken.
If it is a classifiable dam, which is dependent on a high risk or certain size criteria.
Okay, so my question is, how do farmers know? 31. No, how do farmers know that they need to undertake the PIC assessment? And you know what I mean? What communication are we having with landowners around their obligations under this policy?
We are currently working with MB. Got a meeting in another couple of weeks where we're going to discuss the whole comms plan. So there was a coordinated approach across the whole of New Zealand, not just so we're all releasing at the same time, and special interest groups, federated farmers, Irrigation New Zealand, anybody who are those lowest that potentially will be identified in this comms plan and addressed from there.
Okay, my whole point in the questioning is really just raising our collective awareness that communication of these obligations on individual landowners sometimes gets missed in what we do. And so thank you for the assurance that comms plan is being developed, because I think that we often assume that landowners will pick up these things or read it in the farming papers or whatever. I think we need to up our game in terms of helping landowners be aware of what those obligations are, and so that they can easily meet those obligations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could just add one other point on that. We do have an unvalidated dam register of what we believe we know in the area. Those ones we know. There's roughly about 200 dams around the place, and a lot of them are low. Neither one, and a lot of them are unknown. And so we will be contacting all our dam owners that we know about, but the responsibility is still on the owner to address this issue.
Yeah, and again, my point is that we need to communicate that responsibility to these owners because they don't always know.
I can see Anika writing flat out, so I'm sure staff have grasped that Thank you, councillor Story. One quick question I had is basically the weather events and also seismic activity we're getting. Is that lowering trigger points?
Probably not, because when you consider a high PIC dam, like if you're building a house nowadays, it only has to meet the 1 in 100-year event. For a low risk dam, it has between 1 in 200 and 1,000-year event. For high risk events, it's up to a 10,000-year event. So there is a huge assessment of any future risks many years ahead.
Thanks, Owen. Did you have a question, Chris? Did I say no? Robbie.
I'll just ask a question. Where do our controlled discharge dams sit in the region? Are they high or are they just medium, or where do they sit? Because there's like the one in Pyro, there's several in the where do they sit in everything? It's all just a question to ask, sorry.
A lot of those are low risk dams, but we do have 2 tension dams in our region that are medium, one at Pyro and the one at there's 2, they're medium risk ones. So some will be captured by it, but part of the assessment is to actually determine what is the risk.
Is Tauhei the second one, is it?
Tauhei, no, that's all be low PIC. And a lot of those ones around the Tauhei regions are all low PIC.
Any other questions for the team? No, the motion sitting in front of us is that the report for the Waikato Regional Council Dangerous Dams Policy be received. Mover. Happy to thank you, councillor Story. Seconded, councillor Hughes. Councillor Story moved. Councillor Hughes second. Councillor Hughes second. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thanks, guys. The next item up we have is our regional growth, page 34 on your book. Tracy will give us a quick intro.
Yeah, councillors, this is a paper, it is for information, but it's a very important paper. Commonly when we talk about growth, we focus on the future-proof partnership because that is our high growth area. However, with the advent of the MPS Freshwater, the MPS Urban Development, the MPS, National Policy Statements issued on freshwater, urban development, our highly productive land, as well as many other requirements, we thought it was a really good idea to give you an understanding that while future-proof is our high growth area, there are still other areas of potential growth throughout the region. We as a council led through Miffy, Alejandro and Lizette's teams put in submissions to these different plans that are out there. But we just wanted to make sure that one, you understand we have visibility across the region. For those councillors who may not be aware of what is happening in their regions, such as some of the growth proposals down in Taupo, South Waikato, Masmasa, we just wanted to make sure that you have a document in front of you that you can refer to. And really I'll pass it over to Miffy to take us through that.
Kia ora. Thanks, Tracy. So this regional growth report is a semi-regular report, so you will get it every now and then through on the agenda of this committee, and it's to keep you up to date with this planning that is happening across the region to manage growth. So as this is the first one this triennium, we have included a bit more detail about why we actually get involved in growth. And I guess a big part is because the government tells us we need to. It's written into the Resource Management Act. We have the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, the MPSUD, that sets requirements for us. But the other reason that we get involved is because we have other responsibilities. So growth has the potential to impact on these other areas of responsibility. So I've got a slide which sort of gives you a snapshot of those other responsibilities, but it's things like our flood and drainage networks, significant natural areas, highly productive land, biosecurity, and our public transport planning and operation. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the level of growth we have does vary across the region. So obviously the Future Proof sub-region, which consists of Waikato, Waipa, now Matamata Piako district as well, Hamilton City, that area has the highest level of growth and is projected to continue that way. And we do have districts such as Waitomo and Otorohanga that have a very low level of growth. So we do develop projections for the Waikato for the near and longer term future, and that helps us to make our planning decisions. It helps with the long-term plan. And it's also used by central government agencies and the business sector to help plan for the future. So a key tool is our regional policy statement. That the RPS doesn't actually contain rules for growth. We direct our territorial authorities to manage that through their district plans. So given that the RPS it is expecting our districts to do that work, we actually work quite closely with them, and that's an important part of our work. So we regularly meet with the TAs and get involved in their growth planning, and we do, as Tracy noted, submit on plan changes and reviews, and occasionally we do appeal a decision where we feel it's necessary. So Appendix 1 of the report gives you quite a detailed snapshot of how the TAs are going with managing growth. There's a lot of moving parts in there. Next slide, please. Okay, so as Tracy mentioned, Future Proof is a big part. Our regional policy statement, the RPS, contains key components of that Future Proof strategy, including the settlement pattern, which is up there, and you can also see the proposed metro transport alignment on there as well. It does identify housing business land for 30 plus years. We're just in the process of putting the updated strategy into our regional policy statement through proposed change 1. Hearings are being held next week on that. And that's also to make sure that we are giving effect to the MPS for urban development. Finally, we have a map that I would like to show you, something we've been working on. So it's a GIS map of the region that shows areas for protection and known constraints, known as Wahi Toitu and Wahi Tuiora, and also the growth that we know of that is occurring across the region. So this will be really useful for us in providing feedback on those growth proposals, and also help to build up layers of spatial information that we will need to inform our regional spatial strategies that are coming under RM reform. So I'm just going to try and share if that's okay, James.
And councillors, I know some are more familiar with hard copy maps. So if you would like hard copies of the maps or a hard copy generated from this GIS layer that Miffy's about to show you, we're more than happy to do that for you for your relevant constituencies or for the region.
So this is a work in progress. As you can see, there's a bit of a green blob for the Waikato district where we've got the rural zone, unfortunately, popping over top of everything else. We are working on that. So we do have, if I can, I've got a window covering the key. So the green is the Wahi Tuiora. So those are areas of sort of known constraints. So they're not a barrier to development, but they're something we need to consider when development is proposed. But the Wahi Toitu are those areas that really should be protected from growth. So I'll just zoom in on Taupo, so give you a bit of a snapshot. So can see the different areas here. Sorry, it's taking a little while to. So the green are the areas of growth that are in the Taupo 2050 plan, and the orange are the areas of industrial. So it just gives you that snapshot on what actually is proposed. To get the detail of when these might happen, you'll need to look at the strategy itself, but it just gives you an idea of what is happening in those areas. Right.
So Miffy, in terms of Wahi Toitu, so those are, what kind of matters would council be interested in those areas, and what kind of matters would council be interested in? Because they generally form the basis of our submissions in the Wahi Toiora area.
Yes. So the things that make up the Wahi Toitu layer, so the area, the layer of things to be protected, those are generally Part 6 matters and things that are identified in our regional policy statement as needing extra.
Sorry, some of our new
Sorry.
councillors may not
Sorry, Part
understand
6.
Part 6 matters.
Part 6
yeah.
of the of the Resource Management Act, so matters of national significance. So the areas that we, so we give effect to those through our regional policy statement, and so we've picked up those areas based on the policies we have in the RPS. So we've got our flood-prone areas and areas of hazard. So the high-risk flood areas where we've got that information available, or 1% AEP. Areas of land instability risk, significant natural areas, our geothermal areas that are identified for protection, wetlands, archaeological and heritage sites, Wahi Tapu, reserves, dockland, Kiwi2 trust covenants, designations, outstanding natural features and landscapes, erodible soils, steep slopes and deep peat. And then your Wahi Toyota layer is areas of more shallow peat. It's I haven't got the list in front of me, but it's those things that may make it a little bit more difficult to develop, but are not insurmountable, but just need some extra consideration.
Councillor Hughes?
I guess looking at it from an urban dweller, I'm concerned about potential impact of the what we're monitoring on those in the rural sector, and I'd be very interested in Councillor Smith's comments, because it appears to me that there's a huge responsibility being carried by council for monitoring activities that are taking place in these areas, and the potential for it's being imposed on us by the legislation and policies that are currently being developed, which are in the process of development, and how we actually move our consultation and knowledge base to those people so that we actually fully understand the potential impacts of all of these issues on those people in the rural communities. I think it's much easier for urban dwellers. They're not as significantly impacted, but I can certainly see major issues arising for people that are going to be seriously impacted in the future by this legislation, and how, and this future-proof to me is really part of that, because if we don't get it right, then we have the potential to do a lot of damage to our regional economy.
Thank you, Chris.
Sorry, that's probably more of a speech, but I am concerned that we are consulting with the people that are going to be affected by this, all of them.
And there's a point to take out of that. Thank you, Chris. Pam?
Thank you for that speech, and I support you in that. I support you in that. No, my question was more the nuts and bolts of this map. Now, who's going to be using this map? Is this
So
for
this is
external use or just for us?
just internal.
Just internal.
Yeah.
And
There is a version of this in Future Proof that has helped to shape the settlement pattern, and there are some policies around that, but generally this map is just for our internal use to help guide our decision making, and to help build up that spatial picture across the region.
And sorry, very important to mention through the chair that Future Proof has just been through a rather comprehensive consultation process and has had hearings. So I think Future Proof there is, and people who submitted on that included some of our rural landowners, some of the real estate agents, you know, people who are out there. So there is a lot of knowledge, I would suggest, in the community around the Future Proof land pattern, less about the others. The purpose of this is to assist staff to have that regional picture, and also to try and be ahead of some of those issues that are coming up. So if we looked at the total 2050 or 2030, so we can start to direct some of our investment in understanding where we need to have information at our fingertips that we don't have. An example is a few years ago, the expansion of Huntly, nobody had the information that was required to provide very good advice to developers and to the general landowners around some flooding areas. So this is helping us get our regional picture and trying to be ahead of the game rather than just responding when submissions come in.
Nice. Love being ahead of the game. That's good. Just a question on the labels of the areas for this map. So is there, if you scroll down or something, is there a definition of Wahi Toitu and a definition of Wahi Toiora?
Mhm.
Just, I'm just thinking, you know, we get brand new staff. Our staff, we're blessed with brilliant staff from all over the world at times, and just wanting to make sure that there's ease of understanding. Because if you hadn't explained it to me, I wouldn't know what those meant.
Yeah, it's
Whereas
not
urban
there.
footprint, I do understand. So.
Yes. No, it isn't defined in there, in the map, but we can, I'll have to check
I
with
just
you
think-
whether that can actually be put in there. It is defined in the future-proof strategy,
that's right.
which
Yeah,
obviously
but that
sits
requires
outside
somebody
of
to go
this.
to that.
Yes,
and
yeah,
Let's just make it easy
Yeah.
for people.
yes.
Coming to you, councillor Hodge, and then councillor Dunbar-Smith.
So these regional growths and TAs, how are they going to cope with water allocation? Because, you know, Waikato Regional Council's main play in water is the allocation. So with the big growth of the impact in some of these TA areas, I can't see that their water allocation was going into 2030, except for Waterkey, of course. So how are we going to cope with that? How is the infrastructure around the sewages? You know, that's where I think we should have a good picture on in some of these regional growth areas.
So
I really
part
would
of,
like to understand how that all's going to look.
yeah, part of collaborating early with the TAs, when they come to us, we go to all our subject matter experts, including our water people, and seek feedback so that we can identify issues early and raise those with the TAs. With recent expansion in Matamata Piako, that was raised early that there was a water allocation issue. They were able to work it out within their consents, so transfer water from one consent to another or something like that. So it is something that we do look at early on to see whether there is water allocation and wastewater, what's happening in the wastewater space as well. So that's part of that early collaboration, what we have with the TAs.
Tracy, I'll come to Tracy for a further comment.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, as part of one of our workshops next week on the freshwater policy review and the development of that, one of the matters we're going to be talking about is water quantity. I'm very aware that we have many new councillors who would have heard from a lot of people what our policies have said, but what we thought we'd do is run a water allocation 101 session at the start of that workshop, hopefully to clarify and not bamboozle you, because it is a very technical topic. What we can do as part of that is touch base on those territorial authority water allocations, looking at the direction from central government through the MPS, because that will further provide some challenges to some of our territorial authorities in terms of water availability. So we'll incorporate that in there. It is something that we ask our teams to regularly update, so we've got a picture and an understanding. And in terms of not only working with our TAs, as Miffy's outlined, we regularly update our future-proof partners on how much water is available to be taken under our policies or how much isn't, because it's a movable feast on any given week. But we encourage you to come along to that water session.
Mr. Chairman, just on that issue, if I may, for next week, you indicated a similar thought. Can we hear about capturing water, identifying the big holes out there that we can put some water in that falls out of the sky, and we hold it for times when we need it, rather than just letting it all flow out to the sea? We've got to start future proofing for future generation. We're saying water is short supply or will become in short supply, but we waste a lot of it. We don't capture it. So will we be able to hear a little bit about that in the presentation, please?
A very little bit, because that in itself is an extremely complex matter that this council has been working on for the last 6 to 9 years. We have in development our water security strategy. That, I suspect, is the place where we should be having that particular conversation that you're talking about. But of course, it's inextricably linked to water allocation. What I think would be really useful in the presentation next week is to help councillors understand what could actually happen under the existing rules already, in respect to what you're talking about. But we'll weave it in.
Yeah, no, it's certainly of relevance to myself, and I know Councillor Downard as well, so we're concerned with that. Ben.
This is a regional growth update, and a lot of it's been focused on future-proof in recent times. In terms of the National Policy Statement of Highly Productive Land, are we starting to look at where the growth can come with that?
Yes, we are currently assessing the areas that fall within that future development area. So there's a 10-year timeframe. So we're identifying which areas are captured and, well, therefore not captured by the maps, and then identifying what's left. And basically it's going to be a very fine line between assessing supply and demand, and then running through the tests in MPS HPL. So it's still a work in progress, but it is something that is definitely on our minds.
When do you think we'll get something specific on that? Because I know the issue that is raised here sometimes is the constraints on development because of the classification of lands, and the rural sectors don't have anywhere else to grow. It's classified.
So there is the plan change happening to the regional policy statement, and I believe maps are, they're going to have initial maps around August to go out for public consultation. But yeah, the limitation with that is that we can only exclude areas identified in the first 10 years. Anything outside that has to go through the test in the MPS HPL and satisfy the demand and supply side of things.
Through you, Mr. Chair, councillors will recollect that we had the discussion at the last meeting before. No, we've only had 2 this year. The last meeting on the HPL, and Ashley and JP indicated that prior to going out to our territorial authorities, we'll bring those maps before council. So council is aware that was part of the project plan and has been built in. We've already had some meetings with a couple of council staff, very curious about how we're approaching the MPS highly productive land, and I have suggested to their staff to get their councillors to make contact with your good selves, particularly South Waikato for yourself and Robbie. But we've also had some of the other council's staff approach me, I guess, down in Otorohanga and Waitomo. So while it might not be the growth of future-proof, all councils are definitely saying, how is this HPL going to impact us? As Miffy said, there's that exemption, you'll recollect, for things that are already planned and trained, not things that are 30 years out that might be. So it is going to be an interesting conversation, both at a staff level and a councillor level around that.
Thank you, Tracy. Robbie?
Yeah, just to add on to what Ben was discussing, I really struggle in our little area over there that's going to most probably have a larger proportion of class 1 and 2 soils than any other zone, yet we're locked in, we can't do anything else with it. And even if you're going to put it as class 1, 2 soils, we need industry behind that that's going to support it. We can't do that either. So it just seems like the rules want to contain us to doing one thing, but the industry we need to support it won't be there either. And the other thing I got is, at the moment, my area's got 5, 6, maybe 7 already. People are out there that they know they're not going to be able to do this in the future, and they're subdividing off 2-hectare blocks everywhere. They're combining titles to make money out of it now, because they won't be allowed to do this in a couple of years' time. So the thing that you're trying to stop is actually going like rocket fuel at the moment because they're trying to get it done before the rules come in. I understand, but what the direction that's happening now is allowing these things to happen really quickly. The subdivisions and that, because they're not going to be allowed that in the future. That's just the, I'm just making a complaint, no, I'm not asking you to solve it, but what I'm meaning is these things are occurring because these are getting out in the community. That's what I'm saying.
For you, Mr. Chair, that is exactly one of the reasons why we've put this plan together, because we are asked, and it's our statutory responsibility to give effect to these MPSs, but they collide together. And some of the planning has been done at the territorial authority level, some hasn't. So what we're trying to do is help those who haven't done it to be aware of some of those unintended consequences that are happening, as you're saying now. The exact things we're trying to want to manage are actually occurring before, or whilst we go through the 2-year process to have the conversations with people. So
They're printing the money while they can.
yes, that happens with any policy project, but that's the exact reason why the team have put this map together.
Thanks, Robbie. Miffy, just for my benefit, where do I find this GIS information?
So it's an internal map at the moment. When we have it a bit more polished, Tracy, I assume we can give access?
Yeah, definitely, councillors, and it comes back to the conversation I think I raised a couple of months ago around we have an internal map series. I think we need to get councillors some training so you can actually understand what information we have as an organisation that you have access to. We also have an outward facing what's called our maps. This isn't on there yet because it's a work in progress. That's what we wanted to show you publicly, that we are doing this piece of work. So we like to get it right, test it, break it, refine it internally before we put it out publicly. So I guess we'll carry on working. We will probably update this, take another couple of months before it's out there in public for the public to view, because all the information that creates this map is public information. It's just putting that together, as Councillor Story highlighted earlier in the meeting, in a way that people can use it rather than have to click on 14 layers. We can generate you hard copy maps now of some of this so you can understand it for your constituency. I think that's probably the way to assist you now. Regional ones and also ones that might be area specific. Let us know what you want.
Yeah, if I could indicate that, yeah, I'd be keen on that. As Karakia and I are sitting on the shoreline management plan for TCDC, and that's coming into conversation now. And obviously they're limited with areas for growth and stuff like that. So it'll be really handy.
Yeah,
and I encourage any other councillors, to indicate for their areas in the meantime.
Yeah, I guess there's just a caveat on the map, as with all data, that this is the best information we have available. There may be some gaps in it, and the regional level data doesn't always translate directly to property level. So that just needs to be kept in mind.
Run into that before.
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, just to clarify, when you had it up earlier, there were 3 areas that were blue. Top of the Coromandel, off to the side, before you put the overlay back on it again.
It was under that Waihe, yes.
Yeah.
Wahito. Yeah.
And so those are the areas that are essentially, is that what you said, Justine?
Potentially, yes. Yeah. So we can give you a breakdown of what's in each of the layers when we give you the maps as well, so you can understand what's in there. We haven't got it broken into each individual layer, but we can show you what attributes make up each layer. So.
Okay, and there was a bit down to the west coast as well at the bottom, wasn't there? No, I think down past Carfair.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you had it.
Oh,
as a
West
block
Coast, sorry,
there,
not
yeah.
East Coast. So down this way.
And they're essentially not for development? Is that?
So generally they would be areas we would like to see avoided based on the current policies in the RPS. So a lot of it would be steep slopes, erodible land, flood prone areas, conservation land. So they wouldn't be areas we would be expecting to be developed anyway. But this represents those policies spatially, so we get a picture of it.
Are these open for alteration or challenge?
Well, this is based on the data that our GIS people hold. If there is better data, then we are happy to update it. It's not, other than for the future proof area, it's not being included in a statutory document. So it's just a tool. But if it were to be used, say, for the regional spatial strategy, then yes, they would be open to a challenge through that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Through Mr. Chair. So for an example, like the development in Taupo for future growth, you put a challenge against that because it was in blue, or you perceived it to be in blue on one of those?
It's the recent submission on the bundle of plan changes. Yes, yeah, there's some areas of geothermal that we were concerned about.
So councillors, how can I put, I'm really appreciative of the team who have used the colours here. Red has not been used, because red is a colour that triggers nearly 99% of the population. So what they're saying is, look, these in effect are going to be areas that, as Miffy said, we would prefer no building to be on if there are better alternatives. The green is, if you are going to build here, you're going to have to jump through a few hoops and whistles. None of these are saying it is 100% prohibited, you cannot build here. So what they are is they're kind of, as Miffy has said, a representation of our policy direction, a representation of those challenges that people will face, be they flooding, hazards, natural areas, bats, mudfish, all those things you need to consider. And for us, it gives us a really good indication. If, say, Thames Coromandel has come in, which they have come in, Alejandro sitting over there who's been intimately involved in the shoreline management plan in Whaikawa as well, also in TCDC and their spatial planning, trying to understand where they are so constrained to build a nice area that's above ground, that's easily accessible for public transport, infrastructure, is not going to be inundated by saltwater through climate change. Where are the better areas? So these are the maps that will hopefully assist us to have those conversations, because we're aware communities still want to live in places even though we might not think it's the best place for them. So this is really to help us have that conversation.
Thank you, Tracy. So do we have any other questions in the room for Miffy? Thank you for your report. The motion in front of us is that the regional growth update report be received. Thank you, Councillor Hodge. Seconded, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. I think we only have one more item in front of us. You're happy to carry on, or do you want a quick 10-minute break? Carry on. Everyone's nodding.
Councillors' lunch is programmed for midday. I have sent up a flare saying that you've been extremely efficient today getting through your agenda, and asked if perhaps lunch could be brought forward by half an hour.
Fingers crossed. So next up, we have our submission summary report for May 2023. Do you want to introduce anything, Tracy? Or
Just standard
overview?
report here, council reporting what submissions we have made, what's out presently for submission. There are a few matters. Some councils will appreciate that a submissions subcommittee meeting has just popped into your calendars for next week, but pass it over to Alejandro to take us through it.
Tēnā koe te committee.
Ko Alejandro Fuentes Tucuingua. I'm the team leader for policy implementation, for those of you that I haven't met yet. As Tracy mentioned, this is a standard report running for every strategy and policy meeting. In essence, we provide an update of the processes we're involved in as part of our submissions and advocacy role that we have. So some of that has been discussed in the previous papers, and it's how we get involved either with the way that the government proposes new legislation, policy changes, strategies, and like the like of those documents. And when the district councils do growth strategies, district plan changes, and a few other processes under other acts like the Reserves Act, as an example. So what you can see is the information, a snapshot of the information that we got at the time of writing the report, and is spread in 3 annexes. The annex 1 or the attachment 1 is the spatial idea that you have. So that's in page 48 of your agenda pack. And we have the table for the district planning processes by territorial authority. That's from page 49. And lastly, the table for the central government proposals from page 55 of your agenda pack. As I mentioned, this is a snapshot, so some of these processes move on, and we keep the district planning ones mainly record of how the process evolves, and it changes from early engagement all the way to submission hearings and environment court appeals in specific cases. I'm happy to take any questions.
Ben.
Oh, I just want to say thank you very much. It's very useful, very easy to read, and very helpful to know what's going on in specific areas. So thank you.
How out of date is this? The reason I asked that is because I saw a plan change somewhere yesterday, day before, for Haidor and the race course. Hey.
Correct to you, Mr. Chair. So that plan change has run its course. We were part of that process. I believe it was finalized last year. Sorry, but just cannot remember the exact date. But yes, we were part of that process, and we were engaged with Karakia District. And sorry, to answer the other part of the question, this is a snapshot as of the 17th of April, which is when the report was drafted.
Any other questions for Alejandro? Well, thank you very much. The motion we have in front of us is that the report on regional growth update be received. So moved by me, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Hodge. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. That brings us to the end of our planned events.
Excuse me, is the previous one was the regional growth update. We're now on the submissions summary report.
That's what we just did. Oh, did I?
No, but the motion there is the regional growth update be received.
Okay, so.
Yes, right.
So, yeah.
Thank
you.
Thank you, councillor. So councillors, we have had note that lunch will be available in about 15 or 20 minutes. So councillors and our guests, please stick around for that. We've brought it forward. Thank you, James.
And James is going to finish us off with the Karakia. Thank you, James.
Kia unahea mai te kia waitia kia mama Nako titiano nagro iti ara takatoya ra irungo Wakakaria aka ki tina humie huie taikie.
Declare the meeting closed at 11:04. Once again, councillors, as you're aware, we have Nuri and Jaslyn in the chambers, so please make yourselves available to have a bit of a chat. And ladies, please avail yourself of any councillors and any questions you might have.